everybody. Thank you for coming out on this very special evening. We have Judge James Gray from the Libertarian Party, and he is running as Vice President for the United States of America. So we are greatly privileged to have him here tonight. Before you come up, I'd like to ask Brian to introduce you. Because Brian is our local representative for the Libertarian Party. And this is Glimpses Coffee Shop, and we have meetings here every Wednesday night, which are somewhat political, but our main thrust is the Constitution. We are just tired of what our government are doing to us, and we want good representation. So, thank you, Brian.
Thank you. My name is Brian Thamer, and I'm the Chair Pro Tem of the Solano County Libertarian Party. Thank you, Paul, for hosting this great event. Always appreciated. Thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate the support. You know, this support starts at 10 people at a time, 20 people at a time, and it grows like a snowball. Next month it'll be 100 people. Next month it'll be 1,000 people. That's how we're going to win this battle. Not staying through the same old course of the two-party system. Hopefully, as Judge Gray speaks, you'll listen to his ideas and churn them. Don't just accept them blindly. Think about them and, that makes sense. Or, how are you going to do that? Think about it. Because I think when you actually think about the ideas and not just blindly accept them, they mean more to you. And they make sense. So, if you have a chance, later on, think about a donation. If you like his ideas and you want to make sure that they continue to be spread across the state and across the country, think about making a donation. He's not chartering first-class jets, and he's not staying at the Ritz-Carlton. I think he did Southwest and the Holiday Inn. And as far as I know, Goldman Sachs hasn't dropped $1 million on his campaign, so every little bit helps. So with that, I'm going to yield the stage to Judge James Gray.
This is a fairly small group, so interrupt me as you have questions. We'll just talk as we go. I can't say I have all the answers, but I certainly am concerned about the direction our country is going in. And I was quoted publicly and accurately for numbers of months saying that Governor Gary Johnson is the most qualified person to be President of the United States that I know of. And I believe that. Not because of what he says, although that's important, but what he's actually done while he was the governor of New Mexico. He actually vetoed more spending bills than all other governors combined during his 8 years. He vetoed 750 excessive spending bills. One of them was my favorite. And he said, it came to me, it was 260 pages long. I took one look at it and said in my veto message, I don't have time to review this. You take it back, you make it more concise, you only have it dealing with one subject at a time, and I'll look at it. And it never came back. I think that's the type of leadership that we need. By the way, he also was rated by the ACLU, because we are fiscally conservative, but we're also socially tolerant. He was rated by the ACLU. They had 25 different areas, 25 different questions. They would give out liberty torches for somebody standing up for liberty. Romney got 0. Obama got 16. And Governor Gary Johnson got 23. So he isn't just a person who says things, he actually stands up for them and does them. And I'm going to give you an example. A little bit about my background. I was in the Peace Corps, then I was in the Navy. I was Navy JAG for 4 years. After that, I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles in the Central District of California. I actually held the record for the largest drug prosecution in the Central District of California back in 1978. 75 kilos of heroin, 165 pounds, was and is a whole bunch of heroin. Does anybody have a concept of what the record prosecution is today in the Central District of California? 18 tons of cocaine in one place. So you can tell, all this sort of stuff. So I was then appointed by Governor Duke Majan, actually, to the municipal court bench in Orange County, which is where I live, at the end of 1983. I was eventually elevated to the Superior Court. I've been a trial court judge for 25 years, just retired about a year and a half ago. I did something very unusual for a sitting trial court judge. On April the April the 8th, 1992, I held a press conference and stated my conviction that our nation's drug policy is not working, and we simply must put our heads together and change it. That for numbers and numbers of reasons, too much incarceration, too many drugs, leading our kids astray, and the rest of that. So I've been speaking publicly now for more than 20 years on this subject. The reason I bring that up now is that nationally, people involved in big-time drug policy reform, we pretty much know each other. We know what's going on. We know who's thinking of doing this and who's talking about doing that. All of a sudden, we all looked at our newspapers together back in 1999, and we saw, my goodness, who is this Governor Gary Johnson? Because he has come out in favor of the legalization of drugs. So we all rallied, and of course we all contacted, and pretty soon he had a forum, and I went to Albuquerque, and I was a part of his forum, etc. But the reason I'm saying this, he didn't have any constituents on that. He conducted his own audit. He looked at the situation and said, this isn't working. We've got to change it. Let's do something different. And he had the fortitude to stand up and take action. Do we want somebody that stands up and has the fortitude and take action for the United States of America? We are absolutely craving that. Governor Gary Johnson is the most qualified person to be President of the United States that I know of. He left the state of New Mexico with $1 billion surplus after 8 years. He also had this track record of working well. He was a Republican governor in a Democratic state. He worked well with people. He'd talk to people, figure out what we can do to make things better. He also, by the way, we have endorsed the SAFE Initiative. Do you know what the SAFE Initiative is here in California? It is for the repeal of the death penalty. You know something? Regardless of your philosophy, and I don't know what it is, and it doesn't particularly matter, the death penalty is not working. And it's so expensive, by the way, if you're interested in anybody interested in how your tax money is spent by chance, maybe so. It's 7 times more expensive to certify somebody for the death penalty than it would be to charge them, convict them, have all of their appeals, and keep them in prison the rest of their lives. So just from a financial standpoint, much less the literal fact that the victims, the family of the people that have been killed or whatever, are used as pawns forever. I was a part as a judge of one death penalty case. That was back in 1987. A really bad guy who actually, as best we can determine, robbed AM/PM mini-marts and killed the non-resisting clerks, killed 5 people by executing, just shooting him in the back of the head after they gave him whatever money they had. So I had the preliminary hearing, we bound him over, he went to trial in 1989, was convicted, sentenced to San Quentin. He is still in San Quentin, and he has yet to file his first appeal. I mean, my goodness, how many years ago was that? Where it just simply is not working. It is out of control. Who will support the repeal of the death penalty? Governor Gary Johnson, Judge Jim Gray. The idea, of course, that anybody could be executed and thereafter you find that they were actually innocent of the offense. This is what happened when Governor Gary Johnson was a governor of New Mexico. He actually sponsored legislation that would have required all appeals on death penalty cases to be completed within 2 years. It didn't pass. 4 years after that, they found 3 people, 2 guys and a girl, who were motorcycle gang members and stuff, and they were charged and convicted of death penalty offenses and sentenced to die. 4 years after this happened, the person who had been the primary witness in this recanted her testimony and said, actually I made it up, it didn't happen. Somebody else did it. And eventually that somebody else confessed to the murders, knowing precise information that only the killer would have known. And Governor Johnson said, oh my God, had that legislation that I sponsored passed, these 3 people would be dead. And at that point he just realized this isn't working and we have to change it. The man will stand up for liberty. The man will stand up for what we want. You can look at the Republicans, Romney, you can look at the Democrats, Obama. The Patriot Act, I was a Republican lifelong until the passage of the so-called Patriot Act. and at that point, as a matter of conscience, could no longer be involved in any form of a group that would condone, much less assist, in this direct frontal assault on our civil liberties. So I left the Republican Party. It took me about 9.5 seconds to determine that I was a libertarian, and I've been a libertarian ever since, and I always will be. The NDAA, what does that stand for? The so-called National Defense Authorization Act, passed by Congress, signed by Mr. Obama. What does it do? You all should know. Anybody, citizen or not, if they are labeled a so-called terrorist, they can be they can be detained, namely incarcerated. No charges can be brought against them. No trial will be given them, and they could actually be moved to another country. Who knows what would happen? Well, we do know what would happen to them in another country. They would be tortured, just on the say-so of somebody in the executive department. Who will stand for the repeal of the NDAA? Not Mr. Romney, not Mr. Obama, only Governor Johnson. Does anybody care? The soul of the United States of America is our freedoms and is our liberties. I hope you would agree. Our soul is under attack by our very own government, and this simply must not stand.
So they don't even have to get a warrant for these NDAs?
No.
So it's just the executive branch, any member of the executive branch?
Well, I'm sure it would be the president or something, and that's in the law. But someone in the executive branch could decide that I am a terrorist, and that would take care of that. Habeas corpus is no longer, habeas corpus is only from Congress. The NDAA allows this sort of thing to happen. These simply are not the things that we have to, these are not what we stand for. So, what are issues other than what I've talked about? Are you aware? You all should be, because if you didn't care, you wouldn't be here. You have self-selected to be caring, patriotic Americans. Are you aware that for every dollar that the United States government spends today, 43 cents is borrowed? Do I need to say that again? How many companies could possibly sustain something like that? How many households could possibly sustain something like that? The federal government has been doing it for years. The federal government hasn't even passed a budget. Governor Gary Johnson realizes this, and he says in any type of problem area there are a three-stage response. The first stage is simply recognizing you have a problem. I think finally our people are understanding that we are fiscally in trouble. We are Greece. We're just bigger, so it's taking longer for this to occur, although it's going to be even harder for us to get out of it than Greece if we keep going the same way we have. But I think we finally realize we have a problem. Number two is you explain the problem. You explain, basically you go public and you say, okay folks, we are in this trouble. We are borrowing 43 cents for every dollar we spend. These are the amounts of money that we're receiving. These are can expect to receive. These are the amounts that we must spend. These are our discretionary amounts. We're going to have to reduce our spending. The third group is that you have to. Everybody will have to share the pain. I believe Americans will rally if you tell them the truth, if you explain the problem, and at that point they believe everyone else will do it, they will do their share. That's what Americans do. I see a couple of Vietnam veterans, and good for you, and Navy. I was Navy and you were Marine Corps, so off we go. People will share. They will rally as long as they don't feel that they're being taken advantage of. So with leadership, we will be able to explain this, and we will submit a balanced budget to Congress in 2013, and it will reduce spending by 43%. That is not going to be easy, but there's so many areas. It isn't as if we're going to take all the fire protection and all the police. I mean, that's fear-mongering stuff. You look at so many agencies that we have. For example, one of the things that we will do is have a sunset provision for all federal agencies. What does that mean? Let's say every 5 years, every agency in the federal government will be required to come to Congress individually, on their own, and request funding. By doing this, they'll have to say what they've been doing for the last 5 years, how much money they've spent, and what the results have been. Okay? Then they will say what our plan is for the next 5 years, what our budget is, etc. What's going to happen? Maybe three of the things. The Congress will look at it and say, you know, these are duplicated. The other agency's doing this. We don't need to do this anymore. And they will reduce those and, of course, reduce the funding. The other two, one of them, way to go. You know, it's a good idea. Keep doing this. The third one, the fifth one, you know, let's reduce it a bit. We'll reduce your funding, etc. This will also, by the way, give these federal agencies an opportunity to shine. Hey, look what we've been doing. You know, it's been wonderful. And if that's the case, pat them on the head and say, way to go. I don't think that's going to happen very often, but that is certainly a possibility. But more likely, and I can remember, even though Governor Perry can't, I can remember the names of the agencies that we will very likely simply do away with and abolish. You know, the Department of Education. For heaven's sake, folks, why is the federal government involved in education? They should not be. We should repeal, we should abolish the Department of Education. And I'll talk about education again in a minute. The Department of Commerce, for heaven's sake. This is private industry. The industry can do this. It's a boggle of bureaucrats and everything else. The Department of Energy. Hey, maybe the private sector can figure out what works and what doesn't. Why, for example, has the federal government, the Department of Energy, unilaterally, I would say artificially decided that ethanol should be made from corn? There are all kinds of other products, such as hemp, by the way, that will do it better. I was on a radio show out of Iowa, and a farmer came on. It was a talk show. And he said, well, I'm going to act and speak against my own economic self-interest because I raise corn. However, hemp, or he mentioned some other crop, will be much more successful per acre in bringing much more energy per an acre than corn. And corn will clog your carburetors and the hemp won't. I mean, why should the federal government be involved in this anyway? Get rid of the Department of Education. And then let me talk about something that you probably haven't thought of. But for about the last 10 years, every time I find a Native American, I say, what do you think of the Bureau of Indian Affairs? And to a person, they despise it. Wouldn't you? If you think about what's going on here, and I'm not going to speak about the 1820s when this agency was put in, or 1840s or whatever else, but in today's world, they pat you on the head and say, well, you're not intelligent enough to take care of the education of your children, so the government will do it for you. You know, you're not intelligent enough to manage your properties, so we will release those out. Oh, by the way, we've lost about $10 billion that is of your money. You know, mistakes happen, but we will govern your property for you. Get rid of them. And I heard a story one time. You'll love this. This man was taking a tour of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, the headquarters building. And he walked into this room about the size of a football field, wall-to-wall desks. Everybody was there having a good time, drinking coffee, phones were ringing, all the rest. But he looked over in the corner and he saw one guy that was in hysterics. He was just in tears. He was just mortified. He said, what's the matter with him? And the guy said, oh, don't worry about him. His Indian died. Well, you know, it's almost that way. There are almost as many administrators as there are Indians. Okay? It's almost the same thing in the Department of Agriculture, where we have more people now regulating the agriculture than we do farmers. I mean, it's out of control. And I don't know what you think about FDR and the New Deal and the rest. I have my own thoughts. But many programs put in by FDR are still in existence. We call them something different. Let's audit them. Let's look at them. So a lot of this 43 cents reduced spending of government will simply be reduced because we won't have those regulators anymore. You may not be aware, but after the George W. Bush administration, actually we had 200,000 more regulators for the federal government in place on the payroll after his 8 years in office than we did when he began. 200,000. And by the way, Obama has beaten that record in 4 years. What's going on here? So part of the 43% reduction will be we don't need those. We can't stand those. We can't have that regulation like that. Let me tell you something else. About 5 weeks ago, I was at a fundraiser and happened to be sitting next to a woman. Made an idle conversation. What do? I'm the branch manager of a Farmers and Merchants Bank in Long Beach. Okay. Let me ask you, ma'am. Is it true that your bank does not want money? Yes, it's true. Because we can't loan out the money much, and so if we receive your money, we have to pay you interest on it, so it costs us money to have you give money to our bank. And then she told me something that is critically important. She said, 30% of my employees do nothing but attempt to satisfy government regulations. Imagine that. Now, if you look back at this, the whole housing problem was caused by the federal government, pretty much. Why? Because we had Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So you are a bank, and you're a representative in Bank of Integrity, and you give only good loans. But you're a bank also, and you think, well, you know, wait a minute, I can give loans that probably won't work, but it doesn't matter to me. I'll get my money out of it. The federal government will insure it in the event that something goes wrong. I have no risks. So you start making lots of money. So then your shareholders say, well, wait a minute, what about his bank? They're making all kinds of money. You should do the same thing. So everybody starts giving these bad loans because they're insured by the federal government. And transparently, I mean, somebody making $25,000 a year is not going to be able to afford to buy a $400,000 house. Come on, folks. And the price of homes will not continue to increase. These are problems caused by the federal government. But now, according to this woman, and according to another executive that I've talked to at J.P. Morgan and another one at the U.S. Bank, the federal regulators have completely gone, the pendulum has gone the other way. Now they don't want any loans particularly to take place. So they are under instruction to be really picky with regard to loans, and if there's anything wrong at all, reject it. They will not insure them. Loans cannot take place. So now we are in a financial crisis in our country. Yes? How do you get out of this? How do you bring back prosperity? Yes, you reduce government spending, very importantly, but also it takes more than that. To get prosperity, you need to get businesses moving. Somebody comes to a bank with a good business plan, who is financially responsible, intelligent. You want to give that person a loan so he can start a company of 5, 10, 15 people. That's where jobs come from. These people cannot get loans today. Why? Because of the federal government. The government is the problem. I applaud Ron Paul. I know a lot of you here are supporting Ron Paul. He is a hero. This man has won the election. He will go down in history as having mainstreamed ideas of this kind. Bless him forever. He is a hero. He is not going to win, of course, the Republican nomination. It's unfortunate, but that, I think, is pretty well known. But Governor Gary Johnson and Ron Paul have very, very similar, and so do I, have very, very similar views. I was told by Governor Johnson, he asked me to be his running mate. I was flattered. I said I will do it, but there's one condition. And the condition is we will run to win. I'm not naive. I understand the odds. I'm appalled at the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that the Republicans and Democrats are getting. We may get up to $50 to $100 million for our campaign, and I'm optimistic that this can happen, but we're not going to have their money. We know that. But we will be able to divide this campaign into 2 phases. Well, 3 phases. The first phase we've already accomplished. We have been nominated. He has been nominated as a presidential candidate, and I've been nominated as the vice presidential candidate. The second phase will end at the end of this coming September. We still have several months to go. We must be polling at 15%. We must be polling at 15%. Why does that make any difference? Because if we do, we will be a part of the presidential debates. There are 3 of them already scheduled in October, 3 for the president, actually 1 for the vice president. If we poll at 15%, we will be a part of those debates. If we get into the debates, all the rules will change. We definitely have a chance to win, because that was what I told Governor Johnson when I accepted this. There's one condition: we will run to win. We can do this. If we don't get into the debates, I think we're dead. Okay? I've said it. That's realism. If we do get into the debates, I think we have a really good chance. People want that third way. I sent out the information once I received the nomination from the Libertarian Party to my friends and associates and everything on my emails. I got back an email from the former president of the Hispanic Bar Association of Orange County. Has to be a Democrat, I don't know, but I'm assuming so. Dear Judge Gray, I am so pleased that now I don't have to choose between Obama and Romney. People crave what we stand for. They will vote for what we stand for if we can get in the debates. It's up to you. You take this personally. You look at this. You see where we are. I welcome it. Governor Johnson, by the way, in this conversation, told me, Jim, if you disagree with me on anything, don't hesitate. It's okay. You may state your opinion, even if publicly I'm in a different place. How many people do you know of who would say something like that? But I've written a book, actually, it was from 2010, on issues. It's called A Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems, and it talks about numbers of things, and I do want to talk about education, at least before I take for questions. And it's amazing how very similar and compatible my views are with Governor Johnson's. Not that I didn't have any of that in mind. They're written, I can't change them. And they're very, very similar, which tells me something really good. You know, he came at his views from one different direction. I came from mine from another. Dr. Paul came to his from another. It's got to work. And you know something? I'm a libertarian, and so are you, in so many ways. What we do is not warm and fuzzy. Oh, it's not poor baby. Oh, it's not the government will take care of you. You know, you have to kind of have a little work ethic here. But it works. What we talk about works. What made our country great is the libertarian work ethic, is the ethic to get out there and earn that extra dollar and to have our freedoms. This is what we stand for. So let me take some questions, but I'd like to talk about education first. Our schools, I believe you would all agree, our schools have failed our children. Our schools are failing our children, particularly in the inner city areas, but everywhere. Why? Well, to take it differently, all of the clothes that we are wearing, the ties, the cars, whatever it is, how do we decide to buy them? Well, we spend our money. We go to the store. We figure out what clothes we like, what we're willing to pay. We make those decisions, and basically we get the clothes that we want for the price we want to pay. That's the way all consumer goods are purchased. However, in the schools, it's completely different. The schools, the federal government comes from the top. They provide a lot of money to the state. First, of course, the federal government keeps a lot first, then gives it to the state. They keep a bunch. Then it goes to the school districts. They work around, keep a bunch. Finally comes down to the school administration. They do the same, keep a bunch. Eventually, it filters down to the kids. The whole issue can be responded to and answered by one question. And when you're talking to your friends and you're talking about bringing back excellence, which we will do, we will bring back excellence to the school system after 4 years minimum. The question is, who is in a better position to decide where and how your children should be educated? You as the parents or the government? That is not a hard question to answer. So you give the parents the ability to choose where the school dollars are going to be spent. That's what it is. You can call it a school voucher, you can call it a scholarship. I don't care what you call it. You allow the parents to decide where that money is going to be spent. And then if they don't like the school that their kids are going to, what are they going to do? They're going to take them to your school. And what are you going to do? All these students are leaving your school. You're going to do one of three things. You're going to think, wait, what are you doing that I'm not doing? How can I get better so that I can compete? Or you'll go out of business. Good. Either way, good. Or you'll sell to somebody else who will come in and will bring quality. Will bring creativity. We will get excellence back. Why? Because the parents will demand it. That's the answer. It's happening. It's been happening for quite a while in Milwaukee. It's now spread to most of Wisconsin. We will bring this back and bring excellence back to our schools. Pretty much the same deal with healthcare. We just need competition works. What a secret. Imagine that. Competition works. I'm a libertarian. We are competing in this election campaign. We need you. We need you to take it personally. We need you to spread our message to your circle of friends. To be able to discuss this and tell people. If it just comes down to this. If a poll taker calls you, don't hang up. And your vote is your own, at least for, whatever. But tell them, I'm going to vote for Governor Gary Johnson for president. Imagine the difference it would make to have Governor Johnson in these debates as to the issues that would be discussed. Romney and Obama don't want to talk about drug policy. I mean, they just don't. Certainly not with regard to marijuana, treating marijuana like wine or something like that. They don't want to touch that at all. Governor Johnson's there, it will be discussed. Schools will be discussed. Our military involvement overseas will be discussed. These are things that we must discuss. And I guarantee you that if we are in those debates, we're going to really give them a run for their money. We will give that third way. If only. You know something? Let's do something that America has never done before. We will never agree on the small things. There will always be small things and we'll have disagreements, that's fine. But let's agree on one big thing. Let us elect a libertarian to the White House for 4 years and try liberty and prosperity. And if you don't like liberty, equal opportunity, and prosperity after 4 years, you can go back to voting tyranny in again if you want to. But let's try this as an experiment. Let's try working together for the benefit of our children and our grandchildren. It's up to you. It's simply up to you. One more thing. I was in the military, like we've talked about before. I was in Vietnam for a little while, and I've seen what happens. We really must support our troops. If we're going to send any of our troops into harm's way, under the Johnson-Gray administration, those guys are going to be well equipped. However, as Ron Paul says, there are something on the order of 192 countries in the world that are recognized, at least by the United Nations, so we can begin with that. Dr. Paul says that at least we have bases in 130 of them. It depends how you define bases or military reservations, but let's just take that. I think there are probably more, but let's say there are at least, though, in those 130 countries, something on the order of 900, 950 military installations. Do we need those for our protection? I mean, my goodness sakes, do we need those for our protection? I am not an isolationist. I wouldn't bring them all back, but come on. Japan is not in danger of being attacked from anybody. Is Germany going to be attacked by Austria? I really don't think so. There was a town, I read this recently. It was a small town near a big army base in Germany. And they said 92%, you can't leave, this base can't leave because 92% of our gross revenues comes from the military base. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, why aren't we spending that in Nebraska or New Jersey or New Mexico? Why are we spending it in Germany in today's world? It doesn't make sense. If we need it for our protection, all bets are off. That's what we will do. But it couldn't possibly be necessary. Sending our troops to Somalia, for heaven's sake? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Even Afghanistan, which I actually supported going into Afghanistan to root out those people that attacked 9/11. I absolutely disfavored. In fact, I was campaigning for office in 2004. I was the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate in California. And I was quoted accurately as saying that if we put ground troops in Iraq without the full involvement and assistance of the world community, it would be the biggest mistake of my lifetime. And I've seen nothing since to change my mind. We simply should not be doing this. We can't afford it. If you look at the Roman Empire, they were never defeated from without, but they overextended and they collapsed from within. Same thing with the Ottoman Empire. If you want to look at the same thing with the Soviet, they all overextended. Guess what we're doing now? And even if it was a good idea, which it has never been, is that what we want to be doing? We can't afford it. We can't continue to do this. Will Romney continue to do this? You betcha. Will Obama? He's already shown that that's exactly what he's doing. Somalia, indeed. Governor Gary Johnson is our only choice. We give you that third possibility. This is the most exciting thing that has happened to me since the birth of my children. This is doable. We are running to win, and this is absolutely doable. We will do it for you, we will do it for our children, and we will do it for our grandchildren. So we're your choice, and it's going to be up to you. And I appreciate the opportunity of talking with you, and I look forward to your questions. So thank you.